Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Season 1, Episode 2. Welcome to Marvel Plus, the podcast devoted solely to the Disney Plus Marvel series. My name is Brett Scott. I am your host, and this is the show. And right up front today, I have to apologize because today's episode may be a little shorter than normal. I had a guest lined up for today, and unfortunately, last minute, things fell through, and they were unable to make it. So today, I'm going to be tackling episode 2 all by my lonesome. Now, I've done this before, but I haven't done this solo in a while. But hopefully, I still have the chops for it, and you guys will enjoy the show. But as I was saying, since I won't have a guest to conversate with back and forth, to bounce ideas off of, it tends to make the episodes a little shorter. But I don't want to shortchange you. I'm going to do my best to give you your money's worth. Obviously, that's a joke. But honestly, time is money. Honestly, it's worth more than money, and I don't take it for granted. So that being said, I'm always going to do my best on this podcast because it means a lot that you are using some of your time to listen to me. All right, so a lot happened this week. We got a ton of information thrown at us. We had a lot of questions answered and a lot of new ones asked. So let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right into it. Episode 2. All right. The opening scene, we got John Walker in his high school locker room, and it seems like they're doing this kind of rollout for him, right, as Captain America. Almost in the way they did with Steve when he was new, kind of going on tour and announcing to the world, this is Captain America. This is what he stands for, etc. And in this scene, we kind of get to see him as vulnerable, right? He's nervous, and, he seems like a decent guy. I know everyone is speculating that he's going to be the big bad, or at least a bad guy, an antagonist, right? So, but the way they're introducing him here, he seems like a good guy. And we get introduced to his friend, which we're not exactly sure who it is yet, but later we kind of find out that this is Lamar Hoskins, a.k.a. Battlestar. He's kind of the right-hand man of John Walker. And through this conversation that these two are having, we kind of get the idea that John Walker has in the past had some moments of violence, because the guy says you can't just punch your way out of problems anymore. As Captain America, it's a different ball game. You have to act a little differently. So yeah, we get some sort of inclination to his past a little bit, and then so we get this big rollout, right? He's on Good Morning America. They're broadcasting from his high school, and I gotta say, when they show this high school, he's like out on the football field, right? Is this not the biggest high school sports place you've ever seen? Like, this is it looks like a stadium. This is absolutely ridiculous. Like, no high school I've ever been to looks like. I've seen some really nice high schools. There's some really nice ones here in Columbus. Never seen anything like the one where they're broadcasting Good Morning America from it. Okay. All right, so we get some cool flashbacks, right, of his training and possibly his testing to become Captain America, and he looks pretty legit, right, for not being a super soldier, which, we get the idea he's not enhanced, right? He even says that. He says, he doesn't have fancy tech, he's not super strong, so at least at this point, he hasn't had any super soldier serum or anything like that, but he can handle that shield very much in the same way as Steve did. Like, he's really good with it. Super athletic, super shredded. He looks like a specimen, right? A little callback to Winter Soldier there. Okay, so we find out that he is the first American to ever receive 3 Medals of Honor. Very highly decorated and experienced soldier. And yeah, at this point, he seems like a decent guy, that's just trying to do right by the mantle of Captain America. And then in the next scene, we get Bucky and Sam in the same scene together, right? First time, the whole first episode, they were doing their own things. This is the first time we actually see them side by side. So Bucky, really upset with Sam. He's really upset that Sam gave up the shield, and he's saying that, you didn't have the right to do that, just laying into him, right? He's not happy about Sam passing up the mantle. And so Sam is heading off on a mission to Munich, right? He's going to hunt down the Flag Smashers, and Bucky decides he's going to tag along, And so the buddy cop adventure begins, right? The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is now in full swing. We always knew that this was going to be a funny kind of comedic mixed with action, back and forth banter, mixed in with high stakes action. We always kind of knew that. We always knew this was the lethal weapon of the Disney Plus series. So really cool to see it finally kicking off, right? And we immediately get that back and forth banter, between the two, where they're constantly poking at each other. And then they're on a plane, and they're getting ready to jump out. So we get this throwback line, and the entire scene really is a throwback. When they're about to jump off the plane, and Bucky said, Steve always had a plan, and Falcon says, I have a plan. And then he just jumps off the plane. And this is kind of a replay of the moment in Avengers. I think it's Avengers. When Tony says something about having an attack plan, He's like, we need an attack plan, or do you have an attack plan? And Steve says, I have a plan. Attack. Right? He's like, we needed a plan of attack. And Steve says, we have a plan, or I have a plan. And that plan is attack. And then he jumps off the plane, right? Same deal. Just hops right off, kind of, mid-conversation. Okay. So they make it into this warehouse in Munich, and they're searching for the bad guys, the Flag Smashers, right? And I gotta say, this White Panther line, hilarious, okay? Sam says to Bucky, look at you all stealthy, creeping around. A little time in Wakanda, and you come out White Panther. Dude, this was probably the funniest line of the entire episode. And there was a lot of funny stuff in this episode. And they do really good at balancing the serious and the action and the comedy. Really good job at it. But that White Panther line, to me, was the funniest line in the entire episode. Okay, so they find the Flag Smashers, right? They're stealing these giant crates full of something, right? And after they escape, it turns out that they were stealing vaccines. So Sam and Bucky, they chase them down, right? They chase them down, and we get one of those action scenes where, they're fighting on top of semi-trailers. Like, we've seen this in other movies before. We've seen it in The Matrix. We've probably even seen it in other Avengers films. But these semi-trailers are moving down the highway at high speed, and people are fighting on top of them, jumping back and forth. Really great action, right? Clearly, the budget for this series is unlimited for all these series. So we quickly discover that the Flag Smashers are all enhanced super soldiers, right? It's a big reveal. Because they're like mopping the floor with Sam and Bucky. And luckily, new Captain America John Walker and his partner Battlestar show up to save the day. Now, they don't completely save the day. They kind of get their asses kicked too, but they at least provide somewhat of a distraction. And in the end, the Flag Smashers still get away. In all this melee, we do figure out some things. We figure out at least that the leader of the Flag Smashers is a woman. We don't know who it is yet, but she is. They thought she was a hostage at the beginning of the chase scene. Turned out no, she's actually the leader of this group. So after the battle, Sam and Bucky are walking down the road. Right? They have no ride back to wherever they're going. They just flew off a semi-trailer. So they're walking back, and John Walker and Battlestar pull up on this military vehicle and offer them a ride. And while they're driving down the road, they they offer to team up. They want to all work together, but Sam and Bucky are not, they're not having it. Not interested at all in working with the new Captain America. So Sam and Bucky, go off on their own. They're going to set off on their own path to track down the Flag Smashers, and Cap and Battlestar head in their own direction. Cap. I can't get used to calling him Cap. Hopefully I won't have to for long. So, next scene, we get some insight, right? We get a look at the Flag Smashers. And it seems a lot of people see them as freedom fighters or revolutionaries, not as terrorists, as we've been told that they are. And as we've seen so far, it looked like they were some sort of terrorist, but I don't know, maybe not. They have a lot of support, and from the common people, and people are giving them safe haven. So this family is giving them a place to kind of rest up and set up shop, and we get to see a very sympathetic side of these Flag Smashers, and they're very humanized in this episode, and it makes us see them as just regular people, not as villains. And this is why I kind of think that the way this is being written, I feel like the Flag Smashers are not going to end up being the main antagonists. Because during this time of regrouping, this part of the episode, we see the leader of the Flag Smashers, her name is Carly Morgenthau. And that's a play on Carl Morgenthau, who was the Flag Smasher in the comics. And I won't pretend like I already knew that. I looked that up. But the character Flag Smasher from the comics name was Carl Morgenthau. And it's kind of cool. They did a gender swap, and this is Carly Morgenthau. So we see her get a text from someone saying, you stole from me, and now I'm going to kill you. And now, whoever this is, this power broker, I think that's the main antagonist of this series. And I think that eventually, now, hold on to your britches here, because I think eventually the Flag Smashers are actually going to team up with Sam and Bucky to take on this power broker, whoever it is. And I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Please write in to the email, marvelpluspodcast@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts on who this power broker is, or whether or not the Flag Smashers are actually the good guys, like I was saying. What do you think? I've heard the idea of it being General Ross from The Incredible Hulk. That guy, Betsy Ross's father, the guy who made Abomination to combat the Hulk. And we've seen him in that, and we've seen him in several Avengers films. So he's a recurring character, and I've heard people saying that he could be the power broker. But outside of that, I have no idea. I know that in the comics, the power broker was actually a group. It was kind of an organization that would give people powers for the right price. They had the ability to give superhuman abilities if people had enough money to pay for it. And so they were, power brokers. It was pretty clever, I think. I like it. But anyway, since they're making it seem like it's a person, a single person in the series, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do it or who it's going to be. General Ross would actually be pretty cool, because in the comics, he eventually experiments on himself and becomes the Red Hulk. And it'd be kind of cool. It'd be cool if they went down that road of that storyline. But anyway, I don't want to get too far off topic or speculate too much. I was just talking last week about how I don't want to do too much guessing and speculation, because I want to actually enjoy the series and not be disappointed when I don't get what I was hoping for. But yeah, so let's move on. Okay, so in the next scene with Sam and Bucky, I was really happy to see this, because I was talking a couple months ago about how I was hoping to see this character, Isaiah Bradley, in the series. And I was thrilled that they brought him in, because I think it's perfect. I think having Sam struggling with taking on the mantle of Captain America, mixed with hearing this story of a black man who once sort of did the same, and was imprisoned for it. I just think the story was too perfect not to tell here. I think it has potential to be a much better story than the original comic book version, where Steve Rogers was the one who discovered the secret history of the first black Captain America, the history of Isaiah Bradley. Now we have Sam discovering it, and I think it's really cool. Like that would be a terrible thing to pass up. I think it's going to make for great storytelling. But we find out that Isaiah Bradley had encountered the Winter Soldier way back in the 50s, when he was part of the secret Super Soldier program. And if they did actually explain this yet, I'm not sure. But going forward, I'm sure they will. I'm sure they'll explain that Isaiah Bradley, along with hundreds of other African Americans, were forced to take the serum way back in the late 40s. With these black military members, Captain America was missing, and the government wanted more super soldiers like him, and so they experimented on these guys, and it kind of has Tuskegee study feels. If you don't know the story of Tuskegee, there was a group of people, government and intellectuals. I don't know exactly, but it was a group of professionals who decided that they would pretend to treat African Americans for syphilis, and they would actually inject them with nothing. And then they just kind of watched them die. They watched how syphilis affected them over a lifetime, and just, it was a study that these men did not know they were a part of. And I don't know, it just kind of gives me those feels. Not the exact same type of thing. They're not injecting things into them to change them or give them any diseases, but I don't know. It just I don't know. Just reminded me of that a little bit. So anyway, we get a little bit of his background, but not the full story. But I definitely think we're going to be coming back to Isaiah in the future episodes. I most definitely think they're going to set him up as sort of a mentor character for Sam. And, that's how I had hoped in the beginning that they would do this. And I think it works really well. Really well. Like, this has potential to be one of the best stories we've seen yet. And I actually had a guy write in last week, and he's actually coming on as a guest host next week. His name's Steven Banvard. And he's going to be on for episode 3. But he was saying that he didn't think Disney was taking on race in a direct enough way. And I addressed this a little bit last week, but I think in this episode, they're definitely doing it. We have a lot of straightforward stuff going on in this episode, because right after, like, not only the Isaiah Bradley stuff, but right after that, they leave Isaiah's house, and the cops stop Sam and Bucky right outside, and they're most definitely treating Sam much differently than they're treating Bucky. They even at one point ask Bucky, if Sam is bothering him. Like, it's ridiculous. Eventually, though, the cops discover who these guys are, and they're embarrassed for having hassled Sam the way they did. These guys are world-saving superheroes. So they kind of back down, and it actually turns out that Bucky is actually in trouble. For not attending his court-mandated therapy session. So then we get this one last therapy session, right? Because John Walker has actually stepped in and said Bucky is no longer doing therapy. We need him for government work. So, the therapist is not happy about this, but, Uncle Sam says so. Or Uncle John, I guess. So they have one last session, right? And the therapist brings Sam in as well to partake in this therapy. And him and Bucky, they're trying to sort out what the issues are between the two, and a lot comes out of this. And this was actually my favorite scene of the entire episode. Not just for the comedic banter, which it's definitely there, but we get a really real moment here where Bucky finally reveals why he's so upset, why he's taking it so personally, that Sam gave up the shield. He says to him, he's like, shouldn't have given up the shield. You didn't have a right. And Sam says, why do you care so much? Like, it has nothing to do with you. And Bucky, he says, like, if Steve thought you were the right person for this, if he was wrong about that, if he was wrong about you, then that means he could have been wrong about me. And man, this was so good. It was so good. Like, I almost teared up when he said that. Like, he's struggling so much with, all these terrible things he's done. And Steve was the one and only person who believed in him, that he was a good man, and Steve believed in the entire time. And now Steve's gone, so it's like he's really having doubts about, whether or not he can even be a good person. And I don't know, just great writing, amazing scene, and I absolutely loved it. Like I said, probably my favorite scene from the episode, because look, on top of that, great character moment we had for Bucky, then Sam reveals his reasoning for giving up the shield. He doesn't say precisely his reasoning, but he does say that, it's something that Steve and Bucky could never understand. And once again, I think that's them bringing an interesting potential conversation about race here. I think there are a lot of things to take into account here, but one of the major questions I think Sam was probably asking this of himself, as well, is America ready for a black Captain America? And does Sam want to take on that responsibility of being the first? Everything that entails, the good and the bad that come with it, because let's be honest, there are going to be some detractors. There's still very racist people in this country and around the world. And we've seen this even in the comic sphere, right? In the fandom. People being upset about race swaps or gender swaps, when it comes to these characters. And I think this is another opportunity that the writers are taking to talk to the audience. It's a very meta thing that they're doing. Not only are they asking the question, is America ready for a black Captain America, but they're also making the viewers take a look at themselves and say, are the viewers, are the readers, are the fans ready for a black Captain America? Or a female flag smasher, I'm not necessarily saying that they care about the answer either. It's sort of a rhetorical, but it's a commentary on society. And I think it's great. I think these writers are really smart. And I think they bring up social issues in a really clever way. They write it into the story, and it fits into the story. They don't hit you over the head with it. They don't detract from the story. They make it very much a part of what you're experiencing. And I love it. I love it. Like, I've definitely seen movies and series that do it in a very different way. That did not appeal to me, and I think didn't appeal to a lot of people, because I think at the end of the day, people are coming to be entertained, right? To be told a story, and not to be told how to think or what to feel. But I think what they're doing is very smart, and they've done it all the way through, and it's especially in comics, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But what they do, instead of telling you you should think this way or you should feel that way, what they're doing is they're putting it in a story that makes you question yourself, your own morals, your own ideals, and whether or not you're living up to them, And this is something that I think has been done in comic books for decades. It's always kind of been there, way back when the X-Men first started, and they were kind of a metaphor for racial inequity and inequality. Mutants are feared and misunderstood by the rest of the world, and so the rest of the world tries to put these restrictions on them and tries to keep them separate from the rest of society. So I definitely think it's a part of good storytelling. I don't think it needs to be the main focus for every story all the time, but I definitely think that real life should bleed into your fantasy a little bit, because otherwise you're completely disconnected from it. And we need some elements of real life in every story to keep us engaged, as human beings. So, yeah, I have no problem whatsoever with them telling a story that involves race or, gender inequity or highlights past mistakes of the powers that be. I think it's important. I think it's always been in storytelling, and I think it's relevant. And I honestly think it works best when it's woven into a story. And so, yeah, I love what they're doing here. I think they're doing a fantastic job. And I think this series is only going to get better. All right. Back to the story. So, John Walker approaches Sam and Bucky again about working together, and he kind of fills Sam and Bucky in on all the information that they need to track down the Flag Smashers. And once they have that information, Sam's like, well, thanks for the info. We're going to go at it alone. So, once again, the group set off on different paths, but not before John Walker warns them. You can go your own way, but just remember, you need to stay out of my way. And, now I think we're starting to get just a little glimpse, just see a little bit of that different side of John Walker. He's quickly showing some antagonistic traits. And I just think that's some serious foreshadowing, right, for later, probably in the next episode. And especially for further down the road, if what I'm thinking comes to pass, where Sam and Bucky end up working with the Flag Smashers against John Walker or Captain America or U.S. Agent or whatever we end up calling him. I don't know. It's still very hard for me to call him Captain America, though. So Sam and Bucky are talking, and because of something that Isaiah said earlier to Bucky about his people, what his people were doing. And it's funny because Sam is like, oh, he didn't mean, don't take that to heart, implying that he was talking about his people as in white people. But no, Bucky's like, no, he was talking about Hydra. That was the people that Bucky worked for. He realizes he meant Hydra, and he thinks maybe Hydra might have something to do with this, right? Because they're the ones who had the secret soldier serum in the past, and so he's connecting the dots, and they decide they need to head off to talk to Zemo, Baron Zemo, and you remember Baron Zemo from Captain America: Civil War, and the final scene in this episode is them, heading off to find Zemo or to meet with Zemo or whatever, go to his prison. And the last thing we see at the end of the episode is Zemo in his prison cell. Now, we don't see his face, but I think it's safe to assume that that's Zemo we're looking at in his prison cell. So it's really cool that they're bringing him back for this series. I think I saw some shots of him with a mask on, which is straight out of the comic book. Like, that character of Zemo in the comics was like a masked villain, you know what I mean? And I know a lot of fans are going to be happy to see that if it indeed plays out in this series. You never know what to trust when you see stuff online, but I'm assuming that we're going to see him. We're going to see him mask up at some point, so that would be really awesome. All right, well, that kind of brings us to the end of the synopsis, so let's jump on out of here. All right, ladies and gents, that is going to do it for today. Now, I wanted to speak on something that just happened. Look, I record these episodes on Sunday, so if you're listening to it, it just happened yesterday, but it just so happened that I met this really cool guy while standing in line at the Speedway gas station. Now, I don't usually make small talk or chit-chat with people in line, but today was a little different because I could see right away this was one of my kind. This was my people. Not only did this guy have on a Marvel Comics t-shirt with a giant Marvel Comics logo on the front, he was also covered in comic-themed tattoos. And I was just like, man, I got to talk to this guy. So, I complimented his shirt, and we got to talking about comics and the Disney Plus series and different characters. And I guess it was just lucky because we got to talk for probably like 10 minutes because this line at the checkout was ridiculously long. Like, it was taking forever. Probably somebody playing lottery or something. I don't know what was going on, but, normally that would annoy me, but it was a blessing because I got to meet this guy who, I immediately felt a kinship with. We both listen to a lot of the same podcasts, watch the same shows, and obviously we both read comics. So, there's something cool. There's something special about spotting fellow geeks in the wild, because you usually can't even spot your nerdkin in public. Not everyone advertises, but luckily this gentleman did, and we had a great conversation, and I just wanted to talk about it here and just to acknowledge it. I told him about the podcast, so hopefully he's listening to this right now, and he knows I'm talking about him. And I encourage you, good sir, to write in at marvelpluspodcast@gmail.com, or find me on Twitter or Instagram at RealBrettScott, and tell me your name, because with all the chatting we didn't actually exchange names. So, I'd like to know who I was talking to and how to stay in touch. So if you are listening by chance, I'm glad you listened to the episode. Hopefully you'll stick around. And I just wanted to say it was great meeting you, and I appreciate the conversation that we had. All right, back to business. I guess I don't need to drop all the contact info because I just routed it all off a few seconds ago. But if any of you have anything to add to today's conversation about today's episode or episodes past, you can reach out in one of those three ways: Twitter, Instagram, or email the show. Also, if you enjoy what I'm doing here on Marvel Plus, please make sure and favorite or follow the podcast so you can get all the episodes right when they release every Monday. And lastly, if you'd like to help the podcast grow and reach a larger audience, there are a couple things you can do. The best thing you can do is share the episodes on social media and tell your friends about the podcast. There's nothing better than word of mouth. And I know that some of you are talking because the podcast is growing. Every week we're getting more listeners, and I thank you very much for that. Another way you can help the podcast grow is to head over to Apple Podcasts or iTunes and leave a 5-star review. So, no need to go out of your way, but if you're already listening on one of those platforms, and I know that some of you are, I would really appreciate your rating and review. I know I say this all the time, but, I know there's a million Marvel podcasts out there. And to those of you who have been here from the beginning, and also to those who are listening today for the first time, I want to say thank you for checking out this podcast when there are so many to choose from. It really means the world to me. As always, my name is Brett Scott, and this has been Marvel Plus.